All right. I have 11:30 a.m. Central on the dot, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So we're going to get this thing rolling. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Baker, and I want to welcome you to the first part in a three-part series, and maybe more, an installment of something that we are calling the Nerdy 30. All right. Before I introduce our guest, some context on the series. After I introduce our guest, I'm going to put a timer up on the screen counting down from 30 minutes. At the end of 30 minutes, an alarm will go off, and at that point, the discussion is over. Anything left to be said will either be recapped in a blog and or covered in an additional session if there is enough demand. Because good Lord Almighty, we have a lot of goodness to cover today. And by the way, also, I want to say this. If there's any Q&A throughout this session, please put it in the comments. If you have any questions about anything that Rusty is saying, anything that we're talking about, put it in the comments. If we don't get to those today in the normal course of conversation, we will cover that within the actual blog recap if we do that, or in the next session again. Before we invite in Rusty Newton, who is our expert today, I want to share this. We got some upcoming sessions with the Nerdy 30. Again, it's a three-part series. We got 2 sessions left. We got one next Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific on how to measure a sock with Ray and Ben. Who wouldn't want to hang out with these guys? I mean, come check it out. It's going to be a great session, very practical, just like the one today. And then 2 weeks from Tuesday, or a week from this coming Tuesday, rather, we've got another session on how AI can help overcome cybersecurity burnout. So recommend checking that out too. You can actually sign up for both of those. I'm going to see if I can do this. I think I can post these links into the comment here. I'm going to try that out. We'll see if it works. Let me see. I don't know if that worked or not. You can get more information on these sessions by going to linkedin.com/company/expel/events, or just go to our LinkedIn page and you'll see a couple of links where you can sign up for these things. It is easy, and you'll see more promotion for that coming up. Good stuff. All right. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to invite in Rusty, and I'm going to throw up some facts about him. So Rusty, come. I'm going to invite you in. There he is. Rusty Newton, everyone. Glad to have you. Welcome. So this is the session we're talking about today, how to study for an ACE certification exams. So why Rusty? He's legit, or as some would say, too legit to quit. Rusty has worn many hats. He's currently a principal security solutions engineer here at Expel, but he's also been a consultant. He's been a CISO. He's been an account executive. I even hear he's a Jedi Master, having served on Coruscant.
I see you had that on there.
I did. I did.
That in, yeah.
It's because it's true. One of the things that me and Rusty talked about in prep for this session was that gaining a security certification is different and could take on a different role or form or fashion based on where you're currently serving in your current capacity. And Rusty is great for weighing in on that because he's served in many different capacities. So he's an expert in many ways on this topic. Also, I'll throw this up here. He has a lot of certifications, as you would imagine. Here are 10 of them. So anything from AWS certifications, all of sort of your typical certifications there. He's got some soft skill certifications, like leading in a remote environment. Oh yeah, here's 10 more just for kicks. So he's an expert on certs, and he's got a couple of degrees, including an MBA. So super pumped. Rusty's on. Here's his formal introduction, and then we're going to start the timer. Rusty is a curious and lifelong learner who's built a career in cybersecurity by staying deeply engaged with both the technical and human sides of the field. He's held roles from field tech to CISO and dabbled in sales, consulting, community management at places like Vanderbilt, AWS, Deloitte, and now Expel. Here at Expel, Rusty is a principal security solutions engineer, and he helps Expel's customers take advantage of every aspect of Expel MDR's product suite. Along the way in his career, he has earned over 20 industry certifications and completed a BS in cyber at WGU and an executive MBA through Quantic. Much of his growth has come through a love of learning, especially finding ways to make studying more efficient and sustainable. Whether it's exploring psychology, finding fun in fitness, or gardening with his wife, Love that. Rusty brings the same thoughtful, systems-oriented mindset to everything he does. Also, should be noted, he is an Alabama native. There are two of us at Expel, me and Rusty. So he's covering he's covering the top part of the state, and I'm covering the bottom part of the state. Rusty, thanks for joining us. Appreciate that.
Yeah, happy to be here, Ben. Happy to be here.
All right, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull this down, and then we're going to throw this timer up here on screen, and we're going to get rolling. All right, you ready? You ready for this? Let's do it. All right, Rusty, you are an enthusiast on the topic of learning. Why are you so passionate about it?
That's a good question. Probably too many reasons to list, but I've always been just a curious person from a young age. I dealt with mental health issues as a teenager that led into me kind of getting interested in psychology, and that was kind of a I don't want to go into all those details here, but that kind of led me into more of the interest in psychology. And then many years later, I actually didn't go to college right out of high school. I actually went back when I was around 30, and I had already was actually about to transition into the cybersecurity field. Long career in telecom at that point. And before going back to college, I kind of wondered, like, is there a way I can like refresh my ability to learn how to learn better? And I think maybe I Googled at the time, like actually like how to learn. Stumbled on a course from Dr. Barbara Oakley, who had a course on Coursera.org, like a free college course that was exactly about that, was science of learning. And that really kind of jumped it off from there. From there, I just got more and more interested. Ended up at some point running into Blake Curtis, who's now Dr. Blake Curtis, who's my best friend and colleague. We met at Vanderbilt, and he had the same kind of interest around learning psychology. And we kind of like, baking soda and vinegar, we started kind of amplifying, each other's interest, and started kind of like trading, all the secrets we were finding as we were looking into the science of learning and researching and watching other people's courses and reading books. And then from there on, we both kind of went crazy with it. And so in my own personal journey here, I've just gone deeper and deeper in it. And I don't know, it's something that, it's like, I feel like I'm lazy at heart, and I want to be lazy by figuring out how to do things easier and faster. So
Sure.
It's that kind of self-optimization cycle, maybe.
Yeah, efficiency, right? It's all about
Exactly.
efficiency. And I don't know, there's so much to learn. We've talked about this, Rusty. You and I talked about this in prep for this session. There's so much to learn. And so I have a desire to figure out how I can retain more and more of that stuff, especially as it pertains to my job and even in my day-to-day life. I mean, even in your bio, you talked about, applying these same principles to things like gardening. Like we're talking about what we're talking about within the confines of cybersecurity certs, but these principles can be applied in many different ways. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The science of learning is about learning in general, right? In this case, we're talking about certifications and exams, which is a nice area I think, to practice it in, because the structured nature of exams, and especially like IT and cybersecurity exams, the structured nature of these exams lends itself to giving you maybe some goals and targets that you can work towards.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the habits that we can put in place to grow our knowledge and recall, and we're going to look at them specifically within the context of IT and cyber certifications. Obviously, that's what this was titled. So we need to deliver. So let's pivot to talking specifically about cybersecurity certifications, or security certifications. When you're studying for a certification, where's the typical place that you start? Again, you've studied for plenty of these. You have 20 under your belt, probably more. Where do you start in that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times right now, like I'm working, like coaching with others, friends, colleagues, family, coworkers, random people on LinkedIn, maybe getting into cybersecurity, but also then folks who are already working in cybersecurity IT. And in my case, right, I actually transitioned to cybersecurity from telecom and IT. And so it's going to depend a little bit based on kind of where you're currently at, what you're trying to do, right? So as an example, for someone like me who transitioned into cybersecurity, which I think represents probably a large portion of the people who are interested in this topic in the first place. In that case, right, cybersecurity is a layer on top of IT, right? So if you already have experience in IT, you've already have some experience in cybersecurity in terms of related concepts and knowledge, right? So the best place to start is with a plan, and that plan should involve trying to identify your gaps to figure out what is it that I need to actually learn at this point? What do I already know? And whether you're already in cyber and you're going to grab another certification, you pick up another body of knowledge or skill set. Whether we're not talking about certifications, maybe we're talking about an interview, right? A job interview you have. Even in that case, right? What do you already know about the job and what it involves? What skills do you already have that are associated with it? But what are your gaps? Are there some gaps that you could pick up before the interview that you might want to study, right? So same thing with certification. Like we're trying to identify our gaps to start with so that we can build a plan and have a framework for what we want to actually tackle. And I'll say that with certifications, there are some very specific things that you want to target with, right? That you want to look at the exam objectives and to understand like what does the exam actually test on, and you want to study to that. But you may also want to consider, for example, some details around the exam, like what are the weights on the domains or topics involved, right? So that way you can start planning your approach.
Yeah, that's helpful. Where can people? I'm assuming that information is just on certification websites, exam websites, and then I think you delivered a lot of the same content within a Lunch and Learn within Expel itself. A couple of weeks ago, I think you even mentioned utilizing practice exams to help identify some of the gaps that you have. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the great thing. Like I mentioned earlier, the great thing about IT exams, cybersecurity exams, even some college courses are constructed this way, is that often you will have an exam objectives that are just available, right? So if you go on the internet and you search for CISSP exam objectives or Security Plus exam objectives, you'll get a sheet or a page that shows you exactly what they will test on down to the specific topics, ideas, protocols, whatever, devices, et cetera, depending on what the exam is talking about. And that's what you want to start with. But then they also have practice exams, which practice exams are designed to be really a diagnostic to help you identify your gaps. A lot of people see a practice exam, they think, I'm going to use this for practice. And then they go in there and they just do it over and over again. They run through the questions, but that's not the way to use it. Much more effective if you use it as a diagnostic to find your gaps and to find your weak points. And then I think we'll talk in a bit about some other ways you can double down on that. But the idea is to use that practice exam as a diagnostic. So if you already have some experience in the field, if you're coming in with any experience in the field or an adjacent area to what you're going to go study, you really want to go and figure out the gaps in between that knowledge and experience you have and what else is on the exam so that you can start to get that. And the practice exam is the tool to do that with, because it'll give you actually a report on that. And then from there, that's where you start building your study plan. So before you pick up a book or a 45-hour video course, if you've already got some experience, start with the practice exam. You may only need to do 10 hours of that video course, not 45.
It's all about efficiency. Like we said, efficiency with your time. We've only got a finite amount of time to cover a lot of ground in terms of studying for certifications. And so it's I don't know, it's intimidating for me. Like you said, when you look at a course and you see 25 hours of on-demand demo or on-demand content, it's like, am I going to have to watch through all of this?
Right.
And it's good to know that's taking a practice exam first to determine where you should focus is helpful and frankly hopeful for someone like me who's easily overwhelmed with content.
And it sets the stage, because what you want to do is you want to continue to test as you go along, because as you start to study, right, even if you find out very little about the topic to begin with, right, maybe you do need to do the book of the course. As you get into it, you have now had that first kind of result where you can compare. That way, when you go a week or two into study, you take another practice exam to see how you've progressed. Then you can track that progress, and it's a really nice feeling to see that, oh wow, in a week or two I made this much progress. Now I'm scoring 20% higher. And then you want to see that as you go along. And if you don't score higher at some point, so maybe your scores go down a little bit at some point, that could be due to the nature of having a large body of random questions. Maybe you got some more questions that were just focused on your weak areas. That's actually a good thing, because what you want to do then is dig in on that and kind of fit that into your study plan and go like, oh, wow, I found more weak areas that I need to target. These are the specific things I should be studying, not this other stuff that I already know.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so you've identified gaps, you're starting to study. What are some best practices around learning? I know that in the course of conversation, you've already hinted at some of this stuff, but what would you say are some best practices when the rubber hits the road here?
Yeah. There's a wealth of knowledge on this topic and a lot of different approaches out there. I recommend, one, finding people who have there's evidence, right, that their method works for one, but also looking at the body of scientific literature and research on these topics. There's tons of material out there about teaching and how to teach and how to instruct, but there's also material out there these days that's on as a learner, as an individual who's trying to pick up knowledge or learning, as a student. What are the strategies you should take? What are the approaches you should take? I like there's a group called Learning Scientists. Learningscientists.org is the site. You can check them out at. It's just a group of scientists. They're not selling anything, but they all study cognitive psychology, and they have these 6 strategies around studying. And these are strategies that are all based on modern research on how an individual learner can pick up knowledge effectively. And they also have some good information on like myths and things. There's a lot more than just what's on their website out there. But it's a great starting point that I like to recommend if somebody's interested in kind of the science and popular strategies out there. But as you dig into this, right, you'll hear one thing, for example, about active learning and passive learning. This comes up a lot. It's a useful to just understand it at a high level before you get into the individual strategies or details and methodology. Like active learning and passive learning. Active learning, just think of it as engagement, right? Big caveat here, right? I'm not a learning scientist or researcher. I'm just an enthusiast, right? So I read things, look at like the research, and then I try to implement them, and I kind of experiment on myself. And I look at what other people are doing out there. But with active learning and passive learning, like you don't have to get into all the science behind the stuff you don't want. Just try to understand that the big thing here, the key theme in all this, anything I'll talk about is engagement. Our brains learn better with engagement and cognitive challenge, right? And so passive learning is just watching a video or reading a book. You're just taking in information, right? But active learning is where you're actually using information, you're working with it. And I think some of us know this intuitively, that things tend to stick, right, when you're using them. And some of us refer to it as like I learn better on the job, or they'll say I learn better when I'm practicing or in a lab or doing something like that. And a lot of that is true. That's true, and it's true because in those contexts, when you're on the job, you're probably far more engaged than if you're just sitting there watching a video, right?
Yeah.
So the trick is in a scenario where you need to learn and you're not on the job, right? You need to kind of make it a job almost. You need to kind of simulate that artificially, right? You need to use a variety of techniques and methods to increase the level of engagement. That's active learning. There's always a mix of active and passive learning in any methodology, but increasing the amount of active learning, increasing the amount of engagement, and the work you're doing with the information is gonna it's gonna take you to the right track.
Yeah, for sure. So active learning and passive learning, and then obviously calling back on the information that you learned. So like, talk to us a little bit. I know with your own personal methodology, maybe we can kind of dig into that, your personal methodology around studying. Talk to us about recall, maybe touch on forgetfulness, which I know is something that all of us deal with. Touch on forgetfulness, and then talk about your specific method when it comes to studying and learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And another caveat here, like these methods are what I'm using, but they are established, well researched. They're based on literature and evidence and scientific studies, with double-blind, randomized, controlled studies and these kinds of things that show that these are effective, and they're actively being used at a lot of major educational institutions. They're not prolific enough, in my opinion, which is why I like to talk about them, because most people I talk to are not aware of this. They're still doing things that don't really work that effectively, like they're taking notes and rereading notes, which have been proven over and over again to be one of the least effective, least utilitarian ways to actually get information in your mind. So one thing that my friend Blake and I talk about a lot is the forgetting curve. There's a German psychologist in the 1800s who pioneered experimental memory research. And his name is Ehrman Ebbinghaus. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that exactly correct, so I apologize to any German speakers on the call here. But Ebbinghaus pioneered research around the forgetting curve and the learning curve. Most of us have heard of the learning curve and probably kind of intuitively understand what that means. But a forgetting curve, most people haven't heard of. The forgetting curve is where he actually took like nonsense syllables, practiced memorizing them, And then he would graph over time when he attempted to recall these syllables. He'd graph over time like how he forgot these, and he created a curve that showed how long it took him. Maybe he was actually running the study on himself. How long it took him to forget things, and then later on over the decades and decades, this has been replicated over and over again. And so there's a lot of different forgetting curves out there that all have kind of a similar slope, and you can see how people on average lose their memory of something they learned over time. And so a lot of the base of learning in the kind of realm of memorization, which is kind of the first part of trying to like get stuff into your head, are attempts to overcome this forgetting curve. They're attempts to flatten the curve and make it so that we don't forget things as quickly. Instead, it takes it longer for us to forget something. And there's a variety of ways to do that. And so you mentioned like methodology, right? I actually focus a lot of my personal methodology around an open source software program called Anki or Anki. You'll hear people pronounce it different ways. It's ANKI. And Anki is a intelligent flashcard system that has an algorithm in it that's based on the forgetting curve. And what it does is it allows you to take flashcards and review those flashcards in the manner that you need to get exposed to the right information at the right time, and ideally to practice recall at the right time. And so I mentioned recall because recall is really a key aspect of both the learning strategy that I use and that other people use. If you go on that website, I can talk about learningscientist.org. You'll see it's one of their 6 strategies. Actually, 2 of their strategies. One is spaced recall, and one is, I think they call it retrieval practice, but recall practice, same kind of thing, different name of different studies. And then space practice. And so you combine space practice with retrieval practice or recall practice, and what you get is like you're practicing recall or retrieval of information. And in other words, that's basically like responding to a prompt, right? When you're trying to remember something like a quiz question, right? That's recall practice. The spacing is let's practice this over time and not try to do it all in one big chunk. And so the way to do that is with something like Anki cards. And Anki cards allows you to intelligently then use this kind of methodology over time in an easy and convenient way, as opposed to trying to construct all this with paper.
No, I love that. I love that. I love flashcards. Flashcards are definitely how I help things embed inside of my head. But when you first talked about this Anki idea and how it's sort of embedded into science, and you've done some screen sharing with me and with our Lunch and Learn, it will intelligently space out when these flashcards get in front of your face based on your retention, which is incredible. If anybody's interested in that, by the way, you can find it. Here's a URL that you can visit to get on to get Anki. Just Google it. Like I believe, Rusty, you mentioned it's an open source software, and so you can find it for free. Yeah, you can find it for free on the Google machine. But just go look for it. It's pretty easy to find.
I think the iOS app might cost money, but it supports the project. But I think the Android app, desktop app, most of the other apps are free, and the desktop app, one of the most powerful parts of it.
It's probably worth pitching some money to the project, just saying, based on what it does. So I love that. So you've talked about Anki a little bit. Anything else that you want to touch on around recall, repetition, anything like that before we get into attention spans? Anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, I will say, let me mention a few of the kind of strategies that you can use alongside Anki, because Anki's not just it, right? It's one of the main tools that I use, but I use it in the context of primarily, again, that spaced recall and that spaced repetition, which is going to help you overcome that forgetting curve accurately. And I want to just emphasize that the reason we're doing that instead of taking notes and rereading notes and that kind of thing is because of the difference between exposure and recall. If you're exposed to a bit of information, like you take notes and you see the notes and you go back and you reread the notes, you're re-exposing yourself to information, right? But exposure is not what does the work in the mind and in our brain of terms of like digging that information in or making the connections that's really going to do it. You need to work with the information, and recall is a form of work that actually builds the connection that allows you to then recall the information again in the future. So you're building a habit, so to speak, of having the capability and the skill of being able to recall that information. And that's why we want to do that. But you can add in other strategies. Again, that Learning Scientist website, take a look at something like dual coding and interleaving. Dual coding is using visuals along with words. You can add visuals into your Anki cards. Interleaving is studying multiple topics simultaneously that are kind of adjacent, but kind of alternating back and forth between them so you can build connections between the two. So if you're studying networking, but you're also studying security, right? Maybe spend some time studying firewalls and the networking concepts together because they're going to blend. You're going to find connections between the two.
Yep.
So yeah, definitely look for more strategies that you can kind of layer on top of just that using Anki. But yeah, and then we can talk about some attention maybe.
Yeah, let's do it. Before we hop over there, Joseph mentioned he agreed with Anki. It seems like he's a fan. He said a lot of times you can find pre-made card decks on a given topic, which you've mentioned before as well. If you get into the tool, you can find pre-made decks on certain topics. So
yeah, absolutely.
Definitely check out Anki. All right, yes, attention spans. So attention spans are relatively short these days. It doesn't take a lot for us to start reaching for our phones or any other distracting things within our area. You have any tips around staying attentive and engaged during study sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. One great thing about the strategies we're talking about so far, and if you really understand the idea of active learning and what it means around engagement, that in itself, keeping engagement high will reduce attention, right? If you're just sitting there and you're just watching a video for 45 minutes, you're going to get sleepy because you're not doing anything. Same with just reading a book. After a while, your mind's going to settle. You're going to calm down. Just reading a book for a while is a great way to relax. But if you're trying to learn to pick up information, you're not really wanting to just relax and get too quiet and calm. Because you're going to fall asleep. You're going to get sleepy, especially if you're already tired or you haven't gotten a lot of sleep. So you want to keep engagement high. That means you want to do work with the information. You want to, whiteboard some information. You want to draw visuals for what you're learning. You want to talk to yourself. My good friend Blake, he will record himself as he's talking, and then he'll listen back to what he said on the recording and almost have kind of like a pseudo discussion with himself, trying to like further explain the topic and elaborate on it. Elaboration is one of the learning strategies. That keeps engagement high, right? If you can engage with a friend or colleague, talk with them about what you're learning, take a break, call somebody that you know is really interested in that topic and say, hey, did you know this and this? Or how did this work, right? Start a little discussion about it. That keeps engagement high. Take breaks. There's a lot of research that shows that less is more with retention. There's diminishing returns for studying hours and hours on end. Taking a 5-hour study session and breaking it up into 1 hour every day over 5 days, you will retain significantly more information than if you were to try to cram that all in one day. You really end up wasting time when you study in really large chunks. Take breaks, alternate to different topics. Music, sleep, accountability are things I mentioned, like music, the right kind of music, especially if it's not distracting, but it's upbeat, can really get you going and help you kind of pay attention. There's good research on that. Same with sleep. Sleep is critical for not only attention, but also for memory. One of the most critical things for actually being able to get things to stick. Accountability, some deadlines, promising someone you're going to get it done by a certain time, that can honestly be a really good external, extrinsic incentive. And then I just want to throw in something about a Nappuccino, which was something I tried recently.
I saw this in your notes and I had to hear more. Rusty. Tell me about the Nappuccino.
I totally got this from someone else, and I don't know where they got it from, but I thought it was hilarious, and it kind of made sense to me based on what other things I knew, and it's kind of an emergency technique for when you really need to be awake. So there's something that you can read about, like if you ever watch someone like Andrew Huberman or something like that, you probably hear him talk a bunch about non-sleep deep rest. Basically another word for kind of like a closed eye sort of nap where you don't really fall asleep. You set a timer maybe for 15 or 20 minutes, about the usual time it takes you to almost fall asleep, but you don't want to fall asleep because if you go into a full sleep cycle, you can actually, if you come out of it at the wrong time, you can actually be more drowsy for a while. And that's not what you want. But if you want to get it where awake, 15, 20 minutes for just closing the eyes, resting, almost kind of like a meditation. But if you like caffeine, have your caffeine right before that. have some caffeine, have half a cup of coffee or cup of coffee right before that, then do it. And so by the time the caffeine is hitting, your timer's going off and you're already coming out of that little kind of meditation, sort of non-sleep deep rest cycle. And so you come out of that with like feeling refreshed from that, but then also with the caffeine hitting you at the same time. And so I've tried this a few times now, and it's actually pretty effective. If you're just like an
Wow.
afternoon slump you can't get out of, you need a little bit of emergency wake up. That's one way to do it. Have a Nappuccino.
That is amazing. I'm gonna have to try that out. We just got an espresso machine, and so
There you go.
I might try it. I might try it this afternoon, actually. We have agreement +1 to music for deep focus sessions. Me as well.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of got their own genre. If you're a music person, I'd love to hear about what you're listening to in the comments. But there are Spotify playlists specifically designed for deep focus, and I've found some of them are really helpful, especially some of the ones. Everybody's got their own taste, but for me, like some electronica music with sort of a steady beat that bleeds into all the songs, kind of bleed into each other, kind of helps me get in that flow session.
Lyrics distract me, so I like a lot of just electronic music that's just upbeat. I kind of alter pick the pace based on how excited or anxious I'm feeling about something.
That's right. Totally. All right. We got one more question. Time check, 4 minutes. We're doing good. If you guys have any questions, I see one from Miravel, which we'll get to at the end. But if you have any other questions, feel free to send them in. Might stay a minute later than the timer just to hit a couple of these questions. But coming in for a landing here, there's a lot more to say on the topic. Again, we were talking, we could have another session for this if we wanted to, but let's talk exam day. So you've studied, you found your gaps, you've studied, you've had some Nappuccinos, you're ready to rock. What are some tips for exam day as we come in for landing here?
Yeah, so ideally by exam day, you like you were just mentioning, right, you identified your gaps, you've taken some practice tests, you know what you needed to study, you've been studying those things, you've built something like Anki, or using a similar tool to Anki, you've built a flashcard deck that is formed of questions that are focused on your weak points, right? So you've built your own custom deck. You built essentially a mini exam, right, that focuses on your weak points. And you're going through and you're practicing recall and the spaced recall over time. Every day you're reviewing your cards, adding some more cards. When exam day comes, there's a few different things you could do. Coming up before that exam, you can go ahead and dive into a little cram session on that deck, just to kind of like freshen up those weak points a little bit more. But then there's some things you can do to kind of like ensure that you're cognitively functioning best, which is one, choose a time of day when you're at peak wakefulness. This is something that most people just don't think about. They just kind of choose a time based on convenience. But often, even if you have to take off work or something for a few hours to go get it at the right time, you want to do that. Figure out the time of day, start paying attention to the time of day when you feel the most awake, you feel the most best, you're in the best mood, or you're just awake and you can actually think straight. Don't take an exam at 9 p.m. at night if that's when you're sleepiest. I had a friend that was doing that one time. That's when he took the exam, and he kept failing the exam. He took it 3 times, and I'm like, dude, when are you taking the exam? Like, tell me about what's going on here. He was taking it when he was like super sleepy, and he finally just went and took it on a Saturday at like 10:30 a.m. or 11 a.m. after he had his coffee, passed it with flying colors. Just so think about that. Time it. Time your caffeine usage if you use caffeine. Meals, think about that. Sometimes with certain people, meals will make them sluggish. Don't have a meal that's going to make you sluggish beforehand. You might have a smaller meal or a different kind of meal. Experiment with fasting. For some people, fasting and skipping breakfast in the morning can make a massive difference. I'm one of those people. I skip breakfast when I'm going to take an exam or something like that, because I am more alert, more awake. Exercise, sometimes just doing 10, 15 minutes, a little strength training, little cardio beforehand. Give yourself time to rest a little bit beforehand so you kind of recover. But that can make a big difference. There's research showing that your ability to recall memories actually increases in the context of exercise. Also on the learning side, there's another tip too, is that if you got like a walking treadmill or something like that, or you like to walk, review flashcards while you're on your treadmill or while you're taking a walk. There's actually on the intake side too, exercise and movement can actually help while you're learning. But yeah, exam day, also that. Confidence, right? If you're using the practice exams in the way I've talked about, and you're using Anki or similar tool in the way I've talked about, by the time you get to the exam, you should be scoring high on both those practice exams, which is going to give you confidence. So you're going to have confidence going into it. And that's another reason to do that, to give yourself that confidence that, like, I am scoring really high on this. I know this material, right? I've built a custom deck, or I know my weak points. I've reviewed all those things. If you're just studying randomly, you're not going to have that confidence going into the exam on exam day.
Yeah. All good tips. All good tips. Wow, we got 20 seconds remaining. This is, speaking of efficiency, Rusty, I think we have been efficient. There's been a lot of ground we've covered here. I do want to hit, if you got time, I would love to hit, I think there were like 3 questions in here. If we can rapid fire these once the timer's about to run out and I have this cool sound at the end. Is it going to work? Wait for it. There we go. Yeah. All right. And then I got this. I found this.
Over.
All right. Anyways, yes, perfect. All right. Let's hit this. So Maryville broke the ice with the first question here. So I want to hit that first. Just very practically speaking, do you have any experience with Udemy or LinkedIn Learning courses? Do you recommend either of those, or one over the other, or what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I've used a bunch of platforms over time: Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, CBT Nuggets. I like them all. They all have. I'll say it this way: for most of them, it's not really about the platform. It's about the author or the instructor. There are some instructors that will put courses on all those sites. There's some instructors that are only available on one side or the other. I would say for any of those, if you find an interesting course, look into or research the instructor. Make sure that they're actually an expert in their field. You can always get on Reddit or large internet forums, websites like Reddit or LinkedIn, and ask about the course if it's one that you're going to spend money on, and see if you can get some other recommendations on it. Reddit's great because there are Reddit forums dedicated to any given certification, and you'll have 40,000 people on that forum just for like a CISM certification or CISSP, and they have all their opinions and their reviews and overly detailed nerdy reviews about that course or that instructor. And that's a great way to just do a little cross-referencing and find like good materials, good courses, good recommendations. But it's not really about the platform so much. It's just more about the individual instructors. That's
a good tip. We have a question here on making space for learning during the week with work schedules. Like any thoughts on that, Rusty?
Yeah. This plays into what I was talking about actually studying in small chunks is better than studying in large chunks. So don't make space for a large 2, 3, 4 hour chunk of study. That's okay. And that's fine if you prefer that and you find out that doesn't work well for you. But for a lot of people, that's what's hard to do. It's hard to find that amount of time, and your attention wanes over 3 or 4 hours. Better if you can just find an hour here or there. And in that hour, you want to set up your environment and everything as focused as much as you can. So that in that hour, what you want to do is focus on taking questions, not taking notes. As you study the material, build Anki cards, or again, something similar to Anki cards. What I do is take questions. And so as I'm reading and watching and working with the material, I'm making questions in my Anki cards. And then throughout the other times of day, take 2 minutes or 3 minutes here and there and review those cards. And so I might spend an hour or two, say, on like a Sunday studying, right? And then Monday and Tuesday, often I'm just going through and I'm reviewing my cards here and there at random times throughout the day if I'm busy during work or with life stuff. And then maybe I'll get another hour or two studying a few days later. And so that's kind of how my flow goes in. I fit in all my study in very busy, hectic life. And so I'm confident others can too. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out that flow. But yeah, try to do it in small chunks.
That's good. Final question here from Jake. It's a great question. AI is all the rage. It's in the news. It's being embedded in every single product we work with, it seems like, these days. Any thoughts on how AI can help the study process? Or should we just stick with manual and just do what the research tells us?
Absolutely, jump into AI. There's way more. We could spend hours talking about this topic, and we probably should at some point do a session and talk about that. I've been playing with it quite a bit, just using ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, and other resources. Think of it this way: AI at a minimum level is a really good partner to bounce ideas off of. So that's one way I use it in learning is when I'm thinking about a certain topic, I'm learning about it, maybe I'm confused on something. I'm not asking it for answers. I'm asking it for different perspectives and different kind of information. It's really good on the creativity side. if you want to make an analogy or a metaphor for something you just learned, like, okay, I learned what network address translation is in networking, right? Hey, ChatGPT, what's a good metaphor I could use to explain network address translation? And then it's going to give you this wild idea, right? And you want to fact check it. You want to make sure it's accurate. You want to ensure there's comprehension there, right? Because it's going to hallucinate sometimes and do strange things. But that's one of the best ways to do it. Also, memory mnemonics and things like that. It can come up with way more ideas for memory mnemonics than I can, right? So if you're looking at like memorizing the 6 learning strategies from learningscientist.org, ask it, describe what they are, and then ask it, hey, give me 5 different memory mnemonics for this, right? And it's going to give you an acrostic mnemonic. It's going to give you this kind of mnemonic, that kind of mnemonic. It's going to come up with all sorts of creative stuff, and then you can bounce those off and then add in your own kind of flavor, right? But yeah, definitely utilize AI for learning. There's a bunch of YouTube videos on there about how people are using it in their learning workflows.
I love it. Rusty, this was valuable for me, and I would assume for others. I appreciate you taking time with us. I want to say this: keep an eye on Rusty's LinkedIn. I dropped a link into the comments. I hope you guys can see it, but Rusty's LinkedIn is linkedin.com/n/Rusty Newton Cyber. Keep an eye, follow Rusty, keep an eye on that, because there may be updates in terms of what he's doing on the learning front, including maybe even a course that he could be posting on popular learning platforms. Again, just something to keep an eye on. Also, I dropped in links to register for the other 2 sessions, and then keep an eye on our YouTube page. We're always creating cool content. This recording will be on demand there as well as here on LinkedIn. So check that out. Rusty, I really appreciate your time here. Super insightful. And I'm going to go at least implement the attention Pacino idea. Nappuccino. That's the one. Yes. So really appreciate your time. So
yeah, thank you, Ben. And as Ben said, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. Look out for my friend Dr. Blake Curtis and I Think Champ is a little thing we're running to start helping kind of like teach and train people and give them tips and insights around learning, educating critical thinking, educating themselves and critical thinking, both in IT and cyber, but in other contexts as well. So definitely keep an eye on our LinkedIn.
All right, sounds good. All right, everyone, and I'm going to throw up this slide, and we're going to log off. Appreciate your time.